Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a really fascinating duality at the very core of European football. We're going to look at how the cold, calculating science of modern tactics and the hot, raw passion of fan culture act as these two completely different, but totally necessary, engines driving the beautiful game forward. We're breaking down decades of tactical evolution, right alongside the rise of the world's most intense stadium atmospheres. Now, we're often forced to choose a side when thinking about this sport, right? It kind of asks us to pick what truly matters most. But as we dive into our source material today, snapping from the cerebral, quiet focus of the tactical whiteboard to the deafening, neon-soaked terraces, we'll quickly see that you literally cannot have one without the other. They feed off each other in ways you might not even expect. Think about these two totally distinct worlds. On one hand, we've got the whiteboard. This is the realm of tactical matrices, heavy data analytics, and wildly complex positional play, like inverted fullbacks. Then, on the other hand, we have the terraces, the raw, smoke-filled chaos of the fans, governed by unwritten rules, Italian ultra culture, and fierce fan ownership models. Today, we're going to see how these two sides constantly collide and merge to create the modern game. All right, let's get into Section 1, Fluid Tactics, Structured Passion. When we look back at the historical timeline, a really fascinating pattern emerges. From the 1970s through the high-octane 2010s and right up to the data-driven 2020s, something interesting happened. As managers evolved their strategies on the pitch to become more and more fluid over the decades, fan culture was doing the exact opposite. Fandom was evolving its own highly rigid, deeply organized structures up in the stands. Let's look at the pitch first. Back in the 1970s, we see the rise of total football, or totalvoetbal, pioneered by manager Rinus Michels and beautifully executed by Johan Cruyff at Ajax and the Dutch national team. This fluid system demanded extreme intelligence and incredible spatial awareness. And you really have to remember just how mind-bending this was at the time. Compared to traditional, rigid formations where defenders always stayed at the back and attackers always stayed at the front, this was revolutionary. Cruyff would roam totally freely, and his teammates would seamlessly switch positions to maintain the team's overall shape. It completely blurred the lines of traditional roles, turning the pitch into this canvas of constant flowing movement that just left opponents completely dizzy. But while total football was making the game entirely fluid and positionless on the grass, something utterly different was happening up in the stands. Over in Italy during the late 60s and 70s, the Ultras movement was born. Young fans began organizing themselves with a truly militant structure. We're talking highly choreographed displays, coordinated drumming, flares, and a literal 24/7 dedication to the club that dictated their entire lives. They took match days from being just casual weekend outings and turned them into deeply organized tribal spectacles with incredibly strict hierarchies and codes of conduct. To really understand that addictive, visceral energy of the terraces, just listen to how one Italian ultra described it. They said, "My life is like being a little drunk without being totally drunk, a mass of people moving together, shaking the cement." Wow, right? It perfectly shows us that while the elite coaches down on the grass were obsessing over manipulating space and time, the fans up in the stands were obsessing over the collective heartbeat of the stadium itself. They were manufacturing a living, breathing atmosphere designed to physically intimidate the opposition. Moving on to Section 2, Controlled Chaos, Gegenpressing meets the wall. Now, at the fiercely protected foundation of German football is something called the 50+1 rule. Basically, this mandate blocks external billionaires from buying absolute control by requiring that clubs hold a majority of their own voting rights. It purposefully keeps football accessible, affordable, and deeply fan-owned. And German fans have fought tooth and nail for this principle. Just look at the Hannover 96 fans. They literally battled for an entire decade to oust their club president Martin Kind, simply to preserve this very role and protect the soul of their club. Imagine 25,000 fans packed tightly together, standing shoulder to shoulder, singing and jumping for 90 straight minutes. That is Borussia Dortmund's legendary South Stand, universally known as the Yellow Wall. Because of that 50+1 rule we just talked about, this incredibly intimidating, deafening environment remains entirely accessible to the working class. To put that into perspective, a season ticket for 17 Bundesliga home games costs less than €300. That massive accessibility is exactly what breeds such ferocious, undeniable life into the stadium. And you better believe that massive crowd directly impacts what happens on the grass. Enter Gegenpressing, or counterpressing. Mastered by Jurgen Klopp at Dortmund, this is a strategy where players aggressively swarm the opponent the exact second they lose the ball. It requires unbelievable fitness, rapid tactical intelligence, and just sheer aggression.
It's a physically demanding, high-octane tactic that was quite literally fueled by the chaotic, relentless energy radiating down from that 25,000-strong yellow wall.
The synergy here is undeniable, and it's deeply emotional. As one Dortmund supporter noted, the passion is absolute, saying, "Everyone in Dortmund is ready to die for this club. You see how passionate the fans are with limited resources?" That relentless, scrappy, underdog mentality of the Gegenpress tactic, it's a direct mirror reflection of the resilient, working-class city supporting it. The fans give the players the adrenaline required to press until their lungs absolutely burn, and the players' relentless pressing gives the fans a reason to roar. Which brings us to Section 3, the modern matrix, data and inverted fullbacks. Well, gone are the days of pure gut instinct and chain-smoking managers on the touchline. Today, football is a total data revolution. As our sources highlight, elite clubs now operate almost like walking statistical models. They track every single run, pass, and defensive movement to build really complex predictive models. We're talking analytics dictating everything, from global scouting networks finding the next hidden superstar, to highly tailored injury prevention programs, to making real-time tactical substitutions based purely on fatigue metrics. It's wild. But even within this cold, data-driven matrix, human philosophy still dictates the ultimate style. Take two of the greatest modern minds in the game, Carlo Ancelotti and Pep Guardiola. Guardiola uses data to achieve absolute structural perfection, right? That's his famous tiki-taka and strict positional play. Ancelotti, meanwhile, uses a much more pragmatic, fast counterattacking style. He relies heavily on elite emotional intelligence and man management to unlock the individual, totally unquantifiable brilliance of players like Vinicius Jr. and Jude Bellingham. Guardiola's structural obsession brings us to arguably the defining tactical trend of the modern era, the inverted fullback. So instead of running straight down the wide touchline like a traditional defender, an inverted fullback tucks inside into central midfield spaces when their team has the ball. Guardiola really championed this with players like Philipp Lahm at Bayern Munich, forming a 2-3-5 attacking shape. It basically acts as a tactical cheat code because it creates a massive numerical overload right in the center of the pitch, completely suffocating the opponent's midfield and offering endless passing triangles. Next time you watch a top-tier Champions League match, really keep an eye on how high these defensive players push. Right now, teams are using intense hybrid man-to-man pressing to stop those central overloads. So how do managers adapt? They unleash roaming fullbacks like Marc Cucurella, who are given the total freedom to push incredibly high up the pitch. This specific movement drags marking defenders entirely out of their zones, completely scrambling the defensive system and creating these newly open spaces for untracked runners to sprint into and exploit. It's literally a constant high-speed game of chess.
All right, let's wrap this up in Section 4, the eternal balance. The reality of modern European football is that it absolutely requires both of these engines firing simultaneously. Yes, data models and analytics optimize a player's physical performance. And yes, brilliant tactical innovations like inverted fullbacks and complex 2-3-5 structures manipulate space on the pitch to gain a massive edge. But let's be real, no matter how much Sunday League players try to replicate a complex 2-3-5 inverted system on a muddy local pitch, true footballing magic only happens when cutting-edge strategy meets that raw, psychological fuel of the stadium. It's the 24/7 ultra culture that pushes players beyond their physical limits in the 90th minute.
So here's a really fascinating thought to leave you with from this explainer. As clubs increasingly turn to algorithms, heat maps, and predictive models, we have to ask ourselves, can data ever fully quantify human emotion? Can an algorithm ever truly replace the roar of the crowd? Tactics, overloads, and positional play absolutely win football matches. But it is the 25,000 screaming fans on the yellow wall and the deeply organized, passionate chaos of the terraces that make those matches worth winning in the very first place. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on both the whiteboard and the stands.